Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin and the battle for the 50-week moving average. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, the battle for the 50-week continues. As you can see previously, it has been a grueling test in the past, often including wicks below it. Right now, Bitcoin is essentially sitting right at its 50-week moving average. The 50-week moving average being right around $103,000, and you can see that's more or less where we are right now. Now, the reason why I think the 50-week moving average plays an important role in sort of the overall structure of the bull market is just because that's what I have seen in the past. So if you isolate all the prior bull markets that ended, you can see that once the weekly closes occurred below the 50-week moving average, the cycle was over. This is what happened in 2021, where we got below it, and once we got below it, I mean, it was already, the price of Bitcoin was already down like 30 something percent from the highs. But when you get the weekly closes below it, that's usually not a good thing. Now, the reason why I've said you need two is because there are times where you'll have one weekly close below it and it really doesn't mean anything, like in the summer of 2021. We've already had wicks below it in the past, but again, no one's getting out of bed for a wick. So if you go back even further and look at the cycle before that, you can see the closes below the 50-week moving average meant it was over, and the cycle before that, the close below the 50-week moving average meant it was over. And you can see historically, as long as you're above that 50-week moving average, things are still relatively okay, right? And I've been really transparent with you guys about it throughout this entire cycle. And even back in early 2025, we talked a lot about holding support here at the 50-week moving average, and also, of course, holding support at the prior cycle high. One of the things right now, though, is that we've already gone below the sort of the highs from earlier this year. If you look at weekly closes earlier, you can see there's still a chance that we might be able to close back above it over the next couple of weeks or so. So I want to I'm rooting for Bitcoin. Like, I want to give it the opportunity to shine if it can. I don't want to, sort of make any premature declarations about like what has to happen. Obviously, from a time-based perspective, we know we're kind of running out of runway, but there is still, a fight going on right now, and so let's see what happens. In terms of timing, one of the things that we've discussed a lot before is the upcoming death cross, right? And I know that sounds kind of scary, but in order for Bitcoin to really get out of the slump that it's in, it needs something, right? It needs something, and a lot of people are pointing towards like the liquidity and the reopening of the U.S. government, or tariff stuff. Just there's various things, but one of the things that I look at is that we've had a lot of times this cycle where Bitcoin was trending down, right? And this, of course, times appears to be no different, where it's just kind of trending down. And ultimately, what you'll notice in the last 3 times that it was doing this, Bitcoin would kind of be sluggish until we got the death cross, right? Until the 50-day moving average crossed below the 200-day moving average. So when that happens, it obviously creates a lot of headlines where, a lot of people get nervous because it's the death cross, and then the death cross ends up marking a local low for a while. Now, I told you guys earlier this year that we would likely have 2 death crosses in 2025, and you can see we had one back in April, and that marked a low, and it looks like we're about to have another one. So in terms of like timing on when we might see Bitcoin try and bounce out of the slump that it's in, that would be my best guess. Now, and sort of when is that going to happen? I mean, it's hard to know exactly because it depends on future price action, but if we were just to extrapolate, which is dangerous to do, it would suggest maybe around the November 11th, plus or minus a day. So I would say between November 10th and November 12th, perhaps that's when the death cross will occur. And so that'll be the best chance for Bitcoin to try to rally out of the slump that it's in, if it's going to, and if the cycle is not over. You should note that we've made a lot of comparisons to the 2019 cycle, and back then, Bitcoin also had a rally off of the death cross. It just led to a lower high. But back then, when it did get a rally, it was about a 40% rally, which today would actually lead to a new all-time high. And I mean, that's one of the things that I've mentioned before, is how in 2019 you had a series of lower highs, whereas in 2025 we've been having sort of a series of higher highs. I mean, especially if you look like locally, a series of higher highs. So that is what I think makes the most amount of sense to watch for right now. I think like it's hard to predict exactly when Bitcoin might find that renewed strength and try to come out of this. My best guess is if it's going to, it'll happen probably next week. And you know, if we get the weekly closes below the 50-week moving average, and nothing comes after the death cross, it might be time to just accept that, all right, we have to go into a downturn for a little bit. One of the things to think about, though, is that if you don't have a euphoria phase like in prior cycles, right? If you don't have a more parabolic rally that brings social interest back, and you just top on apathy, there's a good chance, you know, the downturn wouldn't be as bad, because you don't have all the retail investors that are FOMOing in at the top. So that's kind of a silver lining. You would likely just get sort of like a slower downturn, a series of lower highs and lower lows that's not an 80% drop, but hopefully something a bit more manageable, and that could just go on until interest rates get down to where they potentially need to be, and monetary policy to where it needs to be, in order to be a little bit more accommodative for these, you know, for cryptocurrencies. So that's essentially what I'm watching for right now. I'm just trying to be patient, trying to say, all right, allow the battle at the 50-week moving average continue. Watch for what Bitcoin is doing here and how it is staying above 100K, because if this is like 2019, one of the things that happened back then is that Bitcoin tried to stay above 10K. And this time it's trying to stay above 100K. And what happened back then when Bitcoin was staying above 10K is that it was taking liquidity from altcoins in order to do that, right? We know that alts were bleeding against Bitcoin during that process. And you can see that if you overlay Bitcoin dominance onto the chart, like dominance was skyrocketing during that time. And while dominance has been going up for maybe the last 7 weeks or so, it's obviously been a little down this week. Like, it isn't, we're not seeing that exact same move. And so, you know, maybe there's reason to think it's not exactly the same thing, but it does still seem like a relevant comparison. And it's one of the reasons why I've remained sort of my portfolio more focused on Bitcoin rather than altcoins, because in my opinion, in order to truly have the alt season that people want to have, we have to see Bitcoin hold the 50-week and go a lot higher. And if that doesn't happen, then you would more likely see Bitcoin dominance go up, while alts just slowly, that liquidity from the altcoin market just like slowly goes back to Bitcoin, right? And I mean, I know like on days like today, we've seen some nice rallies in the altcoin market. But again, if you look at alt Bitcoin pairs, like this is a fairly normal bounce for alts. And we actually talked a lot about how you would likely see a bounce by alt Bitcoin pairs in November, but that doesn't mean they're not going to then still bleed into early December. And that is when quantitative tightening ends. And that's, of course, when all Bitcoin pairs found a low in the last cycle, and in 2017, all Bitcoin pairs found that low in early December. And when you look at total 2 minus USDT divided by Bitcoin, you can see that it was early December when it ultimately found that low. So, you know, I think for now, we just have to see if Bitcoin can hold the 50-week moving average. This is really the third time it's been trying to hold it this cycle. So again, we'll see where the weekly close comes in, and we'll take it from there. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.